19 years ago, the Galapagos Islands faced a choice: lose their ancient giants forever, or eradicate more than 140,000 goats in the world's largest island cull. Officially, this massacre was about saving ecosystems on the brink, where giant tortoises had collapsed from 100,000 to just 15,000. But with the islands rebounding and opponents calling it a moral disaster, the story of how invasive goats took over and what happened when humans finally fought back reveals stakes no one expected. How did such a paradise become an emergency zone? 600 miles from the South American mainland, the Galapagos Islands formed an evolutionary world apart. When Charles Darwin stepped ashore in 1835, he found a landscape shaped by millions of years of isolation. The only native land mammals were rice rats and bats. Every other creature, giant tortoises lumbering across the lava fields, finches with beaks tuned to their island's secrets, had adapted to survive in a place with no large predators and no grazing herds. Giant tortoises, the island's living monuments, could exceed 500 pounds and live more than a century. Each island fostered its own tortoise subspecies, each with unique shells and habits. Forests of prickly pear cactus stretched 40 feet into the sky. Daisy trees, Scalesia, formed green canopies where birds nested and reptiles sheltered. The air was thick with the calls of rails and finches, each species fine-tuned to its patch of earth. Darwin's journals described a natural laboratory where evolution could be traced from island to island, species to species. Without hoofed grazers or browsing mammals, the plants grew tall and strange, unafraid. The balance was delicate and complete, an ancient order, untouched, and vulnerable to anything new. Sailors seeking fortune rarely traveled light. From the 1700s onward, pirates, whalers, and merchant crews made the Galapagos a waypoint on long Pacific routes. They carried goats in their holds, not as cargo to sell, but as insurance. When a ship anchored off a volcanic shore, a handful of goats would be released to roam free, left behind as living larders for future visits. This practice, recorded in maritime logs and journals, scattered goats across at least 13 islands over 3 centuries. With no natural predators and a climate that favored year-round grazing, the goats thrived. Each female could breed up to 3 kids per year, doubling a herd every 18 to 24 months. A few animals left on a rocky headland could become thousands in a generation. For passing crews, the plan was simple: return months or years later, and fresh meat would be waiting. For the islands, the cost was hidden at first. The goats, hungry and restless, swept through forests and grasslands, stripping bark, devouring seedlings, and trampling fragile soils. Their numbers multiplied, quietly at first, then explosively. The balance that had endured for millennia began to tilt, setting the stage for an ecological crisis that would soon engulf the Galapagos. By the mid-1990s, the crisis had reached its breaking point. On northern Isabela alone, field surveys in 1997 estimated nearly 100,000 goats roaming the volcanic slopes, a number that seemed almost impossible even to seasoned rangers. The land bore the scars: bare hillsides, deep gullies where soil once held, forests stripped to twisted stumps. The goats, breeding at a rate that doubled their population every 2 years, outpaced every effort to control them. Rangers armed with rifles and working alongside trained dogs tracked hog herds for days across lava fields and dense undergrowth. Each year, hundreds of goats fell to these teams, but thousands more were born before the next dry season. The terrain itself conspired against them. Steep cliffs, hidden lava tubes, and endless miles of tangled brush gave goats countless places to hide. Attempts to fence off tortoise nesting grounds collapsed under the sheer scale of the island. Live capture and export, once floated as a solution, proved logistically impossible and deadly for the animals involved. The frustration grew with each failed attempt. Every round of hunting, every new strategy met with the same result. Goat numbers kept climbing. By 1997, it was clear that conventional methods had lost the race. The ecosystem was unraveling faster than anyone could respond, and the old tools were no solution. Planning for the Galapagos goat eradication demanded a kind of ingenuity rarely seen in conservation. At the heart of the strategy was a simple insight. Goats are deeply social animals. Even when populations dwindle, their instinct is to seek the company of others. Project Isabela's lead planners, drawing on international expertise, decided to turn this trait into their greatest asset. The result was the Judas goat technique, a method that would become a global template for invasive species control. The process began with the capture of wild female goats. Each animal was sterilized by veterinary teams to prevent any chance of breeding. Then they were injected with hormones that kept them in a state of permanent estrus. The biological drive to seek out mates and herds never faded. Fitted with radio telemetry collars, these goats became living beacons. Released back onto the islands, they wandered across lava fields and dense forests, their social signals drawing out the last, most elusive survivors. Hunters equipped with radio receivers tracked the Judas goat's movements, often for weeks. When a Judas goat found a remnant group, the hunters would close in, eliminating every companion, but sparing the Judas goat itself. This cycle repeated over and over, with each Judas goat leading the way to new pockets of hidden animals. The method required patience and precision, but it solved the problem that had stymied every previous attempt: how to find the last few goats in a landscape riddled with caves and cliffs. On Santiago Island, more than 200 Judas goats were deployed. Northern Isabela, with its vast expanse and rugged terrain, demanded even more. Over 770 Judas goats tracked across nearly 250,000 hectares. The logistics were daunting. Each goat needed to be captured, sterilized, treated, collared, and monitored. Teams logged every movement, every signal, building a real-time map of the eradication's progress. The scale of the operation was unprecedented, but so was its effectiveness. This approach transformed the final phase of the campaign. Instead of endless, fruitless searching, the Judas goats turned the tables, making the survivors reveal themselves. The strategy's success would be measured not only in numbers removed, but in the restoration of an ecosystem once thought lost. The offensive began at first light. Helicopters swept over Isabela's volcanic ridges, pilots flying low and fast, sharpshooters leaning from open doors with rifles ready. In just 7 months, from April through October 2004, flight logs recorded 55,657 goats killed from the air. The numbers were staggering. On some days, experienced marksmen averaged hundreds of shots an hour, guided by GPS grids and years of ground reconnaissance. The landscape below was unforgiving. Jagged lava, hidden caves, sudden updrafts that rattled the rotors. For the pilots, each sortie demanded absolute focus. One described the job as flying a lawnmower over a minefield, eyes darting between the terrain, the goats, and the fuel gauge. The risk was ever present. In June 2004, that risk turned real. A helicopter, mid-mission, suffered a mechanical failure and crashed. There were injuries, but no lives lost. Still, the campaign ground to a halt for 4 months. The pause was more than logistical, it was psychological. Goats scattered deeper into the highlands, learning to hide at the first hint of engine noise. For the managers, every lost week meant another breeding cycle, another chance for the population to rebound. The setback forced a reckoning with the dangers and limits of this approach. When the campaign resumed, the pace changed. The easy kills were gone. Survivors had learned to evade the helicopters, slipping into lava tubes or dense thickets. The final phase demanded patience and new tactics. Teams turned to the Judas goats, tracking radio signals for days to locate the last holdouts. Each kill was logged, mapped, and cross-checked, a slow, methodical pursuit replacing the earlier blitz. With so many animals felled in remote places, project leaders faced a decision: what to do with the bodies. Removing 140,000 carcasses by air or ground was impossible. The solution, endorsed by ecologists, was to let nature take its course. Carcasses decomposed in place, returning nutrients to soils that had been stripped bare by decades of grazing. One manager compared hauling them out to removing 10,000 trees from a rainforest. The sight unsettled some, but the logic was ecological, not aesthetic. By the end, the campaign had demanded everything: technical skill, endurance, and a willingness to make hard choices. The scars of the operation lingered on the land and in memory. But with the last goat gone, the island stood on the edge of renewal. Field ecologist Dr. Linda Kayett stands on the volcanic slopes of northern Isabela, notebook in hand, watching as clouds drift over hills once stripped bare. Where goat herds once moved in constant motion, gnawing every green shoot to the ground, the landscape now pulses with color and life. Within months of the last goat's removal, stumps that had been chewed to nubs sprouted new leaves. Scalesia daisy trees, once thought lost, sent up seedlings through the black soil. Plot surveys revealed a transformation almost impossible to imagine. In the most degraded zones, vegetation density surged by more than 300%. Grasslands thickened, shrubs returned, and tree canopies began to close overhead. With the roots holding fast, rain no longer carved deep gullies down the slopes. Soil erosion, once an unstoppable force, slowed by 80% or more. The ground, which had been loose and powdery, now felt firm underfoot. Water lingered in seasonal pools, nourishing insects and birds. Giant tortoises, absent for decades from some valleys, returned to graze and nest. Tracks pressed into new grass, and the air filled again with the calls of finches and rails. Recovery came faster than many had dared hope. For scientists who had watched the ecosystem unravel, the speed of renewal was both a relief and a revelation. Dr. Kayett and her team documented each milestone, from the first Scalesia saplings to the return of native ferns. The land's resilience, hidden beneath years of devastation, had waited for this chance. Every green shoot, every patch of moss stood as proof that the gamble to remove the goats was paying off. The scars were healing, but the story of how this renewal was won, and at what cost, was far from settled. Reckoning would follow. A fisherman stands at the dock on Isabela, arms crossed, watching the patrol boats come and go. He remembers a time when goats were part of daily life, meat on the table, a safety net for lean months. Now the rules are strict, the penalties steep, and the rangers patrol with new resolve. For some, the eradication was a distant event, decided in offices far from the islands. For others, it was a direct attack on tradition and survival. In whispered conversations, and in quiet acts of defiance, goats have found their way back to the shore, hidden in small boats, released under cover of darkness. Each reintroduction is a statement. You cannot erase us or our history so easily. Across the archipelago, the debate grows sharper. Conservationists defend the campaign as a rescue mission for species found nowhere else. They point to the rebirth of forests, the return of tortoises, the numbers that prove recovery. Yet animal welfare advocates see only the cost. 140,000 lives taken, and methods that turn animal instincts into weapons. The Judas goat, sterilized and dosed with hormones, is sent out to betray its own kind, a tactic some call efficient, others call cruel. One advocate writes, "We have made a tool of suffering and called it progress." The tension is not just scientific or ethical, but deeply personal. For every ranger who recalls the silence after the last shot, there is a fisherman who feels the loss of autonomy, and an advocate who mourns the goats as victims of human error. No amount of regrowth or rising tortoise numbers can settle these arguments. With every act of sabotage, every goat smuggled ashore, the lines are drawn again. The islands are greener, but the battle over what should be saved, and at what price, remains unfinished. 19 years after the last goat fell, the numbers tell a story as complex as the landscape itself. More than 140,000 goats were eliminated from the Galapagos, across an expanse of over 500,000 hectares. The effort, which ran from 1997 to 2006, cost $10.5 million. A figure that for conservationists represents both a price tag and a promise. The scale was unprecedented. On northern Isabela, nearly 100,000 goats were removed. Santiago saw 79,000 more. Pinta, the smallest of the three, served as the proving ground for the methods that would follow. Ecosystem rebound is measured in living milestones. In the 1990s, giant tortoise populations had dwindled to about 15,000, down from historic highs near 100,000. Today, that number has climbed to roughly 19,000. Vegetation, once stripped down to bare earth, has increased in density by more than 300% in the hardest-hit areas. Soil erosion, which once carved deep wounds into the volcanic slopes, has slowed by at least 80%. Endemic plants, some thought lost, have reappeared in old haunts. Rails, finches, and iguanas now fill the air and undergrowth with signs of renewal. Vigilance is part of the accounting now. The project's success depends on annual monitoring flights, rapid response teams, and a steady stream of funding. Some tortoise subspecies remain dangerously small with fewer than 200 individuals. The islands once battered by goats are now free of feral herds, but inhabited islands still hold pockets of resistance, and the threat of reintroduction lingers. Paradox is plain. The Galapagos are greener and more alive than they have been in a century, but their wildness now depends on perpetual human oversight. The cost, $10.5 million, 140,000 lives, and a commitment that stretches into the future cannot be measured in numbers alone. The islands are saved, but the work of saving them is never truly finished. The Galapagos now depend on relentless vigilance. One stray goat can undo decades of restoration. Today, humans guard a wilderness we once nearly erased. As intentional reintroductions and local opposition persist, the lesson is clear. Saving a unique world demands perpetual responsibility. In the end, the wild survives only as long as we choose to defend it.